Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? Does anybody else see a problem here? If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions?
In 1996, chairman of the British Referendum Party, Sir James Goldsmith, circulated copies of a short film documentary to millions of households across the country. Frustrated by the lack of mainstream press coverage over what he saw as the dismantling of British sovereignty and independence by colluding politicians, Sir James's wake-up call to the people of Great Britain was stark and shocked many.
What you're about to hear will both surprise and outrage you. It's the true story of Europe. It's the story the politicians don't want you to hear, because it shows how they've deceived us and betrayed our nation. Only in 1994 did Chancellor Kohl's foreign policy spokesman, speaking on behalf of the ruling party of Europe's dominant nation, Germany, clearly reveal the true plan. The plan is to create a federal European superstate. Into it will be merged up to 25 ancient European nations, including our own. This new country, called Europe, will have one parliament, one government, one court of justice, one currency, one flag, and one anthem. That has been the plan all along. But those who favoured it knew the people of Europe would never accept it. They would never willingly surrender their freedoms to become just a province in a vast European superstate. So what did the politicians do? They conspired to keep the truth from the people.
So what is the truth behind the European Union? Is it, as our politicians keep telling us, Britain's best hope for the future? A chance to regain some of that lost prestige on the world stage by being at the centre of Europe? Today in Britain, all three major political parties miraculously appear to agree at least on one thing. They believe in the destruction of Great Britain as an independent nation. They believe an integrated Europe makes sense, that it is the modern, forward-thinking way to go, that it would prevent any chance of a third European war. Unfortunately, nothing could be further from the truth.
The need to unite Europe grew understandably out of the devastation left behind after two catastrophic world wars. Of all the empires, it was perhaps the Nazis who came closest to pulling off the military conquest and occupation of Europe in recent times. In June 1940, Hermann Göring, Reich Marshal of the German Luftwaffe, reviews final plans for Operation Sea Lion, the German invasion of Great Britain. He also discusses with Hitler a new plan to unite Europe, not just under the conquering hammer of Blitzkrieg, but through a lasting political and economic union, which the Nazis named Europäische Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft, or the European Economic Community. In 1942, a conference is held in Berlin to discuss this political and economic integration of Europe. Of all the nations targeted, Britain has proved the wild card because she alone has successfully resisted invasion. Rising to his feet at the conference, Nazi economist Professor Horst Jecht of Berlin University firmly declares that Britain is the greatest obstacle to Germany fulfilling her historic aim of dominating Europe.
Winston Churchill also believed Britain had an incompatible destiny with that of the continent. Referring to the United Kingdom's reliance on her overseas trade, Churchill stated, "If Britain must choose between Europe and the open sea, we will choose the sea." Both Churchill and Jecht were independently remarking on the same phenomenon Napoleon had noticed 150 years before, that Great Britain was a global trading power, and the nations of Europe weren't.
According to the Nazis, Great Britain's awesome maritime capability was beggaring Europe because it was drawing trade away from the continent. If Britain could be conquered militarily or economically, broken up once and for all as a significant economic and political entity, the spoils of all her trade and wealth would go to whoever ran the new European empire. Few in Berlin were in any doubt about who would do the running. But the tide of war turned against Germany. In 1944, a meeting was held at the Hotel Rotas House in Strasbourg between officials of the Nazi government and German industrialists. The theme of the meeting was, how will Germany dominate the peace when she loses the war?
Following the end of World War II, the rebuilding of Europe, and Germany in particular, became a pressing necessity and was largely funded under the Marshall Plan by the United States. Both Washington and London saw the rapid stabilization of the continent after the war as essential in order to prevent any incursion into Western Europe by the new enemy to be feared, the Soviet Union.
Winston Churchill agreed that some form of commonwealth of nations in Europe was desirable for establishing stability and a lasting peace. But he never envisioned Britain as being part of any future United States of Europe.
Winston Churchill's view of Great Britain's relationship with Europe after the Second World War is summarized with these words of his. But we have our own dream and our own task. We are with Europe, but not of it. We are linked, but not comprised. We are interested and associated, but not absorbed.
The Allied answer to military stability in Europe was to be the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, which came into existence in 1949 as a permanent defense alliance for Europe. The European Union officially began life as the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951, a modest industrial cooperation between France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg and Holland. 6 years later, in 1957, the Treaty of Rome was signed by the 6 participating coal and steel community nations. Declaring its goal as the ever closer union of the peoples of Europe, the Treaty of Rome went far beyond launching just a common market. It established the fledgling apparatus for an idealistic new superpower. This new entity was given an existing and unsettlingly familiar name: the European Economic Community. In 1963, Charles de Gaulle and Konrad Adenauer signed the Treaty of Elysee, signifying the symbolic burying of the hatchet between France and Germany. This was the start of a dynamic new dual leadership role in Europe for the two countries. De Gaulle later resigned, and within a year was dead. Britain was invited to submit yet another application to join the EEC. This time, Edward Heath, now as Britain's Conservative Prime Minister, signed the Treaty of Rome and took Britain into the common market on New Year's Day, 1973. Responding to deep concerns within his own country that joining the EEC would compromise Britain's national sovereignty and independence, Heath sought to reassure the British people in a government white paper. He wrote, "There is no question of Britain losing essential national sovereignty." The master plan, of course, was well known to Edward Heath, Lord Hailsham and their colleagues in Brussels. It was the eventual creation of a new European superstate out of 25 existing nations in Europe and Scandinavia, and Britain was going to be part of it. From 1973 onwards, the slow but consistent transfer of power from Westminster to Brussels through successive treaties our own politicians signed became known as the acquis communautaire. It was nicknamed the ratchet, for once powers had been given to Brussels by the member state, they could never be returned.
Initially I thought, like everybody else, that we had joined a common market and what could be nicer and more friendly and sensible and economically wise to do. But since then, in 1975, when we had the vote to remain in that, so we were told, it's become one or two things further than just a common market. It then became, a few years later, a European economic community, then a European community. It's now the European Union, with all sorts of controls and restrictions, regulations, and we're fast approaching, via this new constitution, something that the French have already named potentially a United States of Europe. And I'm not at all sure that that's what I and many others voted to join back in 1975.
Say in 75 we signed up for a social trade agreement, and it's the people who've let the governments, successive governments, gradually vote away our democratic rights. This government has no right to sign us up to the Constitution without the will of the people. But we need the will of the people to stop it. It's no use coming down in 5 years' time, we've signed up to it, we can't get out of it, and the people say, well, we don't want it. It's up to the people of the day to say no.
This is the Strasbourg Parliament. It was built in 1999 at a cost of £300 million. It is open for only 4 days every month.
Co-President Nigel Farage, Freedom and Democracy.
Well, good morning, Mr Van Rompuy. You've been in office for 1 year, and in that time the whole edifice is beginning to crumble. There's chaos. The money's running out. I should thank you. You should perhaps be the pin-up boy of the Eurosceptic movement. But just look around this chamber this morning. Just look at these faces. Look at the fear. Look at the anger. Poor old Barroso here looks like he's seen a ghost. You know, they're beginning to understand that the game is up. And yet, in their desperation to preserve their dream, they want to remove any remaining traces of democracy from the system. And it's pretty clear that none of you have learned anything. You know, when you yourself, Mr Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I suppose I could applaud you for having a sense of humour, but isn't this really just the bunker mentality? You know, your fanaticism is out in the open. You talked about the fact that it was a lie to believe that the nation state could exist in a 21st century globalised world. Well, that may be true in the case of Belgium, who haven't had a government for 6 months, but for the rest of us, right across every member state in this union, and perhaps this is why we see the fear in the faces, increasingly people are saying, we don't want that flag, we don't want the anthem, we don't want this political class, we want the whole thing consigned to the dustbin of history. And we had the Greek tragedy earlier on this year, and now we have the situation in Ireland. Now I know that the stupidity and greed of Irish politicians has a lot to do with this. They should never ever have joined the euro. They suffered with low interest rates, a false boom and a massive bust. But look at your response to them. What they're being told, as their government's collapsing, is that it would be inappropriate for them to have a general election. In fact, Commissioner Wren here said they had to agree their budget first before they'd be allowed to have a general election. Just who the hell do you think you people are? You are very, very dangerous people indeed. Your obsession with creating this euro state means that you're happy to destroy democracy. You appear to be happy for millions and millions of people to be unemployed and to be poor. Untold millions must suffer so that your euro dream can continue. Well, it won't work, because it's Portugal next. With their debt levels of 325% of GDP, they're the next ones on the list, and after that, I suspect it'll be Spain. And the bailout for Spain would be 7 times the size of Ireland, and at that moment, all of the bailout money has gone. There won't be any more. But it's even more serious than economics, because if you rob people of their identity, if you rob them of their democracy, then all they are left with is nationalism and violence. I can only hope and pray that the euro project is destroyed by the markets before that really happens.
Thank you.